My Life Between Lives story from Newton Train Institute practitioners.
I see a whole change in the thrust of searching for answers about who we are and why we're here. And I think it's wonderful, and I just hope the movement continues to expand.
Let us expand the universal consciousness together with a My Life Between Lives story presented by the Michael Newton Institute.
Welcome, my friends. This is my LBL story. My name is Ekomananda. I am your host. Today, our special guest is Paul Orant. Paul is a best-selling author of Essential Healing, who is based in New York City. Paul is also an award-winning master hypnotherapist, who is also a hypnotherapy instructor who has worked in the field over 30 years. Paul is the former president and education director of the Michael Newton Institute. It is my absolute pleasure to have you coming to the show. A big warm welcome to Paul. Thank you for coming to the show.
Really, thank you for having me. It's nice to be with you again.
And I'm very honored to have this conversation and get to know Life Between Life therapists intimately. My first question to you is, how did you actually came to this therapy? And have you always been spiritual and into regression technique?
Well, I think I've been pretty spiritual most of my life. I knew that the way the average person was living their life was not how I wanted to live, but I didn't know an alternative either. But I always had some feeling that there was another dimension, the spirit world, if you will, from early on. And I knew I wanted to do some kind of healing, not really traditional psychotherapy. I tried that, but it didn't really fit for me. And then somewhere along the way, I found Japanese energy healing that I became quite interested in. And actually, when I was 21, moved to Japan and studied there for 2 years, this energy healing, and came back and practiced that for many years, 15 years, I think, in the United States. And as I was doing that work, I made a big shift in my own personal consciousness because I had been trained really to give people advice based on profound spiritual teachings. And it seemed like the right thing to do, but as time went on, I realized it wasn't really empowering people, but making people more dependent on this wise advice, wise old advice at the age of 25. Right? I mean, the teachings were amazing, but it finally became clear once I got some listening training, some counseling training, some client-centered training, that I needed to learn how to listen, not dispense answers or advice. And so that really shifted myself and the people that I was working with, and knowing that I had some skills or tools or techniques that could help them find the answers within. And during that time, instead of giving them answers that might be right or might not be right, and during that time, learned hypnotherapy, which again was pretty much suggestion-based, giving people answers in a way, and then discovered more interactive work, parts therapy, and then regression therapy. Regression therapy was really kind of accidental for me in the beginning. I was working in a medical office doing hypnosis for pain management and was having some pretty good results. But as I was doing that, I had a few people in the office during the sessions that spontaneously regressed to past life. And it wasn't necessarily within their framework or their belief system. And I had read Brian Weiss and others about past life, but I wasn't sure if that's really what was happening there with him in the chair. But I saw that whether it was really a past life remembering or not, that often their physical, mental, emotional conditions were resolved by the session. And I didn't really even know how to facilitate it. So I began to study past life regression. I kept it separate from the medical practice for a long time. Somehow to me, it didn't feel like it really fit initially. And so I started doing past life occasionally amongst the clinical sessions. And then, as you probably know, I had a very profound experience where I was hit by lightning about 23 years ago and had a near-death experience that really transformed me. I knew something was different. I wasn't sure what, but I sure saw the world different. I saw myself different. I had some very profound experiences while I was out of body and back home. And it was a regression therapist that helped me recover details of the memory when I was out of body. And it wasn't an LBL therapist. Michael hadn't yet taught life between life regression, but it was someone that used a somatic approach to regress. And I went back and experienced such profound things that you know from conducting these sessions, unconditional love, oneness, meeting one's guide, feeling free from the body and realizing I'm still conscious, that there is no death. We don't die when the body dies, right? But trying to integrate that into my life after that experience was really difficult. But I began from then to try to figure out a way that I could, in my office, using hypnosis, help have someone have such a transformational experience without having to go through the near-death experience. Somehow I knew past life was close, but it wasn't really doing it. It wasn't until 2001 when a colleague that I was teaching with the National Association of Transpersonal Hypnotherapists, had made contact with Michael Newton and had agreed to sponsor Michael Newton's very first life between life regression training in Virginia Beach in 2001. And he asked me to come and assist at that training because I needed people to do supervision and help out. And I went to that training and saw Michael Newton do the one and only live LBL demonstration in public as part of that training. And watching him work, I said, he figured it out. He figured out how to go past the death scene in the past life and through much research and effort, get them into spirit and then began exploring the spirit world and realized this is really what I was seeking. This is what I was looking for and hadn't been able to figure out. And, that was a really intense training. We had 50 people at that training and long days. It was in Virginia Beach, so it was at the ocean. And I love the ocean. I love to body surf. Never been on the surfboard, but I love to body surf. And so after the couple of days of intense training, I went to swim and ride some waves just to kind of clear my head and chill. And I got washed up on the beach in a pretty big wave and looked across, and there was this guy that also got washed up on the beach. And guess who it was? Michael Newton. Michael lived in Southern California and he loved to body surf. And there he was chilling, kind of recuperating from intense days of training, riding waves. And so we rode waves together. It's kind of a fairy tale story, but it was sunset, dolphins came around, and it was from that moment that he and I became close friends. And that was it. This was my path since then, since 2001.
What a beautiful story that you shared. And that was one of the in-person training or the earliest training that Michael Newton conducted.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what was Michael Newton looks like in person?
Oh, Michael was a very interesting combination. He, there were no airs. I mean, we had great respect for him, but he didn't put on any airs. He was very, very human. He was very available, had a great sense of humor and an amazing, sharp mind. Brilliant man, really brilliant man. And so he could be, intense, especially when it came to teaching his work later on, because that was his baby that he created and developed. It was, an honor to be asked to teach it. but it was also nerve-wracking trying to teach it in front of the master who had developed it. Michael, he was a very, very special person in many, many ways. And I really respect him for the dedication, the time, and he would conduct a life between life regression for 5 hours. He'd be with the person, really digging, really working. And at that time, really doing research. So he was trying to figure out how all this worked and he was really mapping the spirit world. So it wasn't just focusing on the client's questions or why they were there, but it was trying to figure out the whole process and then eventually how to teach it. And he would spend hours after the session writing them out and cataloging them. So he had file cabinets in time full of case studies that were organized by specific themes or occurrences in the session that he later referred back to write his first book, Journey of Souls. So I know how I feel after conducting an LBL session. I'm both exhilarated because it's an honor to facilitate, but I'm exhausted too. It's intense work to really hold the space for the person and guide them, and if they have difficulty, to help them get through. And he did this even later in life, and then documented it all. He was working on a typewriter. He didn't have the benefit of word processor or computer at the time. He had paper files that he organized. And when he wrote his books, he and his wife, Peggy, beautiful, amazing woman that really supported him. I think they were a special duo, really. Their living room floor was covered with piles of paper with different case studies and different themes, and that eventually became chapters and then ultimately the book.
I was very impressed when I first learned how Michael did all the paperwork. There were approximately 7,000 cases, was that right? That all
7,000.
segregated into different segments, different stories, different chapters, different stations. It's absolutely mind-blowing when the book, A Journey of Souls, and then subsequently Destiny of Souls and other books being presented to me. I was absolutely immediately thinking, okay, I'm going to do this.
You know, when Michael taught, the last time Michael taught at the course in Santa Fe, 2005 or 6, I forget exactly. He was getting older and was concerned that he wasn't as sharp as he'd been. But that man, during the middle of his lecture, could say, well, I wrote about soul groups and interaction with those in the soul group on page 237 and the second paragraph. He could quote. Now, I've written a book, and I know the content and I know the process, but can I tell you on this paragraph, on this page, in that chapter? No. But he was like a living encyclopedia in a way. And so I don't mean just academic, because he was very academic. He loved history. He loved astrology, but he had a really big heart too. He was very compassionate and loving. What a combination.
Yes, a specific gift to us, because to me, my first impression when I saw the picture of him, I felt like he might be very academic, very logical, very analytical. How a person like that can found such a life-changing program, a gift that is bestowed to the human race today.
Well, I'm absolutely certain that was his sole mission, his sole purpose. And he had the kind of ego and mental mind that helped him do it. But I think initially it was a struggle for him. He was a traditional family therapist. So even hypnosis was a stretch for him, but he found it was effective in his therapy for patients. But when he had people starting to go into past life, he was really confused. It didn't fit his paradigm. He was more of an agnostic, really. He certainly wasn't religious. And so it was a real stretch for him. But as he pursued it in his sort of scientific manner, it evolved from past life to people eventually going from the death scene in the past life and entering spirit. Now, thank God we have his guidelines, we have his teaching and his experience to guide us when we take someone there. But he didn't have a format. He didn't have a roadmap. He really developed it by working with people. But yeah, to go from scientific, agnostic family therapist to past life regression therapist and eventually life between life regression therapist, he did it very quietly because he knew he would lose the respect of his colleagues. It was too much of a stretch for most people. So he worked very quietly until he really developed a methodology that he found effective and transformational. And then he finally came out of the closet.
Yes, I can certainly sense the challenge for those who work in the medical field. Have you seen a change over the years amongst the medical professionals? Are they more open to this sort of therapies?
I would say yes. So I started hypnotherapy in 1991, and people were still thinking it had to do with pocket watches and goatees and making people do bizarre things. And the biggest challenge we had, even though our work was successful with weight loss, smoking, anxiety, fears, and phobias, getting over that hump of the misbelief or misunderstanding of hypnosis was the biggest challenge of all. Because the methodology works, hypnotherapy works. It was really helping people understand what it was and what it wasn't. It was most difficult. And so, yeah, like I said in the beginning, as I was starting intentional past life regressions, I kept it separate from the medical office. It just felt like it did not fit. And so eventually had my own office next to the medical office where I would do Paul does this weird stuff over there, and here he does his clinical stuff. But I think over time it's definitely evolved. I think people are much more open to it. And it's not to abandon science, but it's to work with it. I mean, hypnotherapy is very effective. Regression therapy is very effective, but I don't think any one tool can solve every problem. And so I collaborated with doctors, with psychologists, with psychiatrists, with acupuncturists, with other practitioners, so that we could support a patient in many ways, rather than saying, oh, this one practice is a solution for everything.
So it's a more holistic approach.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that we need that. I can work clinically with someone on an issue in their life, but without understanding from soul level what the purpose of it is, what the learning of it is, it can be really challenging. And in more traditional talk therapy, you can go back so far, but so much trauma that people experience is pre-verbal. It's in utero, or it's very young, and they can't tell you about it because there's no conscious memory of it. It's stored in the body, it's stored in the subconscious mind, and it's stored in the soul. So I think in the work that we're doing, we really are looking, is this from this life? Does this have to do with ego and mind? Does it have to do with genetics and family, or does it go further? And so we have really powerful tools with regression therapy to find out what was happening in the womb as you were developing and preparing to come. And even beyond that, why? Why did you come in the first place? What did you hope to do in this life? What did you hope to learn, accomplish in this life? What is it you're working on over lifetimes that you're coming in this lifetime to perhaps repeat or find a resolution to?
Would you say that every person's issue happened in this life has something to do with past lives?
Yeah, that's a tough question. No, not necessarily. I mean, okay, in the end, everything is connected. But I would say one of our challenges in doing past life regression and life between life regression, and that's primarily what people come to me for, right? They read Michael Newton, they read Brian Weiss or someone else and go, oh, I want to have past life regression. But someone that hasn't done a lot of personal growth or development, hasn't done any kind of therapy, reads the books, gets excited about it, wants to come in and have this amazing experience. But the first thing you run into is ego or mind or issues in this life. And so I think that it's often important to resolve some of what's in this life first, at least enough so that you can go beyond that and get to the deeper work. Because when someone comes in to have this fantastical past life regression and they run into neglect in childhood, or they run into broken heart from a difficult relationship, and that isn't what they want to look at, they want to have the deep past life regression, it can be difficult to go past that. Sometimes we can get past it, but my question is that breakup, is that challenge simply from this life? Or is it part of a bigger picture or pattern that's reflecting something that happened while they were in utero or in past life? And then we know how to work with it.
Fascinating.
And find a solution for it.
Yes, I have experienced that myself altogether about 13 times. So all my regressions added up together, absolutely break myself down into pieces and know my past, present, and future. No more questions about the self, but that feeling of ascending my energy, connecting to one, really know the one, experience we are one, we are love. It's absolutely life-changing.
Absolutely. And that's, like I said, one of the things that propelled me towards eventually meeting Michael Newton and the life between life regression is I had that spirit, that experience of oneness. I had that experience of unconditional love. And I said, how can I take someone on a journey where they can experience this? And that was something Michael was doing every day. And that's something that can be done through life between life regression. It transforms you.
Transforms. So apart from transformation, what role do you see regression therapy and the life between life therapy on person's healing and their spiritual awakening journey?
There are many, but I think one of the big ones is that many of us live with certain limiting beliefs about ourselves. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. It's my fault. We have guilt. We have shame, these kinds of things. And we really believe them, right? And so one of the biggest themes in my work, whether it's LBL or essential healing session or something more clinical, is to help someone get past those protections and beliefs that are misguided or untrue, and really reconnect with their higher self, with what I call soul essence, with their own divinity. When you reconnect with your soul self, I mean, the soul's not perfect. It comes to planet Earth to learn and grow. There's something perfect in the soul. The soul itself carries the same things the human consciousness carries. But helping someone reconnect with who they really are and remember that, and then begin to be able to live that, I think that's the greatest gift that we have to offer through regression therapy in general, is move them past those beliefs and reconnect with who they are, with their divine self, and remember that and begin to live from that place. Imagine a planet full of people living like that. That's my dream.
Absolutely. I remember someone said to me, if everybody meditated 5 minutes on this planet altogether, we're changing the whole world. That definitely reminds us the role us LBL play in shifting human consciousness